So pretty. Welcome to our visitors. This is a fun day. We could begin a new book study. We are in 1 Samuel, and for our visitors, we are a verse-by-verse, book-by-book Bible group, and so we're beginning the book of 1 Samuel, and I've been excited about this for some amount of time. That we ended up meeting with our church leadership. They asked to meet. I get in trouble a lot, so they asked to meet with me a lot. So anyway, we had lunch with them, and one of the things that the church does that most of you, if you're members, have no idea, is that usually in the fall, around September, the church will do like a 6 to 7 week series. And what they ask is that all of the Bible groups do a complimentary lesson to the sermon. And for years, I've just said, yeah, we're not doing that. And so, because we are a verse by verse, and I just don't want to do it. So they said, we'd really like for you to do it this time. And so in September, we are going to stop in our study of 1 Samuel right about the time David kills Goliath. And we're going to pause. We're going to pause for 7 weeks. The church is going to do a sermon series on the Beatitudes, and they will. They're going to have about 4 teachers in the church where they're going to record and they're going to develop lesson plans. And so we're blessed enough to be one of those classes. So they're going to take the lessons that we teach in here, either me or Jim, and they'll take the videos and they'll develop lesson plans that are accessible to the church and people outside the church. Basically, they have requests all the time for lesson materials, and they wanted to actually harvest some that from the teachers here. So I felt like that if it was just logos, then I would blow it off. But if it's for the church and they're asking, then I felt like I needed to comply this time. But we are in 1 Samuel, and I'm excited about it. 1 Samuel is a book. We'll get to the timeline in just a second. 1 Samuel, originally, 1 and 2 Samuel were all one book, going back in the Hebrew. And it was just called the Book of Samuel, and then there was the Book of Kingdoms that right after it, 1 and 2 Kings. And then as you move into the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible, they changed it to 1st and 2nd Kingdoms, and then you had 3rd and 4th Kingdoms. And then as you move into our English Bibles have gone back to the original name of Samuel and kept faithful to the division that was cut there. But originally, 1st and 2nd Samuel were all one book. And the author is actually unknown. You would assume that it is Samuel, and I think most conservative scholars believe that the book of Samuel, at least the beginning parts of it, were written by Samuel, but midway through this story he dies, and it's hard for a dead guy to write. And so they don't believe that he actually wrote the parts that occurred after his death. And a lot of the conservative theologians believe that there was a high government official that actually took the pen after Samuel had passed away. Now, the book of Samuel is about the kingdoms that rise. If you remember the book of Judges, actually let's go to the slide 5. If you remember the book of Judges, that's little print, but book of Judges is like right in the middle there. You'll see that that's about 300 years that takes place in the book of Judges, and the whole story of Judges is anarchy. Over and over and over, the book of Judges says, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And this book is about the establishment of a united kingdom. This is about the rising of the kings for a united Israel. Now, this is not a great story. The reason it's not a great story is because God didn't want them to have kings. God wanted to be their king. And at some point in this study, you'll see Samuel going to God and saying the people want a king, and Samuel is devastated. He's devastated because he believes that they have abandoned him, and God said, they're not abandoning you, they're abandoning me. And he establishes these 3 kings as part of the United Kingdom, and that takes place. Samuel is born about 1121 BC, and this 1 Samuel will end about 971 BC. So this is 150 years. Samuel as an individual kind of overlaps. He takes his place about 35 years after Samson is born. So this is really close in proximity to what is happening. The message of all of this story is the sovereignty of God. Over and over and over, the themes are the sovereignty of God and how God uses barrenness, how God uses wicked people, how God uses evil circumstances, how God uses events and kingdoms to orchestrate his will and his plan. And we see that today in the story of Hannah. After these three kings go away, you'll see what we've talked about many times, which is the two different kingdoms, Israel in the north, the 10 tribes in the north, and Judah. Eventually, Israel is taken over, and the northern kingdom is taken over by Assyria in 722 BC. And we see the southern kingdom taken into Babylon in 536 BC. And then we see the three kingdoms that rise on the right-hand side before Christ's birth that are prophesied in Daniel when we studied the book of Daniel, and that's Persia, Greece, and Rome. So that gives you some idea as to the timeline and where we are. Again, one other thing that God uses in this that we will see are vessels of honor and vessels of dishonor. And we meet two of those today in two wives that are in one household.
There was a certain man of Ramathaim, Zophim, of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, and the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, son and Ephrathite. He had two wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. Now this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh, where the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests of the Lord. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give a portion to Peninnah his wife and to her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her. For though the Lord had closed her womb, and her rival used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb, so it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons?
There you go. What a man. Hey, baby, aren't I worth more than 10? Isn't that awesome? Baby. All right. There is a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim. So Hebrew lesson. This name, this city, is not particularly relevant, but one thing that we're going to hit, and I've hit this before, is those last two letters, im. So you've heard the word Elohim, and you know that that's plural. That is, in Genesis, Elohim is the royal we. It is what we believe is the Trinity that creates the earth. You've heard of cherubim, which is many cherubim. You've heard of, what's some more words? What are the giants? Nephilim, the giants, seraphim. So all of that, that's a plural word. And so this means heights or hills. And I'm going to come back to the Hebrew and why I'm bringing that up later in the lesson. And so he lives here, and I'm not going to go back for the interest of time to explain to you where, but in 1 Chronicles it explains his heritage is a Levite. And he is not living in a Levitical town. He's an Ephraimite. And he is living somewhere where he shouldn't be, and I'm not exactly for sure why, and the Bible doesn't explain, but he's not living where he's supposed to be. Now, that being said, he's faithful, because he's going up year after year after year to offer at Shiloh. And at this point, the tabernacle is at Shiloh. And he is the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph. Those are the middle names of my 4 sons. And he had 2 wives. Problem. Like, ding, ding, ding. So that's a problem, right? Because no man can even please one woman. And so he has 2 wives. So Look at all these guys. That's right. And so at this point in time, the Israelites believed that they had been blessed by God. And part of that blessing is laid out in Deuteronomy is that there would be the fruit of their womb, that they would be prosperous and they would have kids. And so for someone like Hannah to have this feeling, she felt afflicted, she felt cursed, she felt like God was not recognizing, she felt sick. And you see these words all the way through, calling affliction, and she's pouring out her soul, and she is devastated by this. And this Peninnah, by the way, Peninnah means pearl, and you can tell she's a real gem, right? And Hannah means grace. And so Peninnah is going up, and Peninnah is making fun of her year after year after year after year. Let's go to the map, just so we can see. So you'll see Ramathon, Zophim, over on the left, and you see Shiloh. Shiloh is where the temple was for about 350 years. And then eventually David moved it. He'll move it as we get into more of 1st and 2nd Samuel down to Jerusalem, which was a brilliant move, by the way. Jerusalem had previously been called Jebus, and notice, there was a rivalry between Judah and Benjamin. If you're watching the House of David, you see the Judah. By the way, the House of David, they make up a bunch of stuff. Just know that a lot of that's just not scriptural. But David does a really political move, and he moves to a town called Jebus that is right on the border, so that he is not part of Judah and not part of Benjamin, and that's where he ended up establishing the temple. Now, it says year by year, they go up to Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle is. So go to the next slide. So these are the feast. And you'll notice up at the top, I can't read it, but it says in Exodus that there are 3 times of the year that you shall go to the Lord of hosts, the Lord of lords. And that is all of your males. So the men were required 3 times a year to go up and make offerings. The women were not required to do this. But this family is so faithful that they do it. And I know you're looking on the right and you're saying, okay, well, it says 3 times a year, but there's 4 green check marks. Well, if you notice, in Passover is the 14th day of Nisan, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the 15th. So when they would go up for those 8 days and offer, that was considered one. And by the way, I think you all know this, but Nisan is the first religious month for the Jews. It's March and April, and in Exodus, God resets the calendar and says, this is going to be your first month. And he puts Passover right in the middle of the very first month. So these people are going up, and they are worshiping the Lord of hosts, which is mentioned here. Go to slide 9. So this is a term that is referenced 280 times in the Bible. This is the first time that it's referenced. Yahweh Tsevaot. It's Tsevaot. And it means Lord of hosts. And it's used in these 280 times to talk about all of those that are under the subjection of God. It includes the angels. It includes all of Israel. It will include the church. He is the Lord of a host of people, and that's who they're worshiping. So back up to the scripture. Year by year, they're going up, and she has no children. And this is a consistent story that we've seen with Sarah, with Rebekah, with Rachel. We've seen it with Samson's mother. We've seen it with Elizabeth. And she's devastated. And there were 2 sons there of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. And these are bad dudes. So Eli is the high priest, and Hophni and Phinehas are bad dudes. And in the 2nd chapter, we're going to learn why they're bad. And I'll just tell you, they're bad because they did not know the Lord, and they actually stole sacrifices from the people. So this is going on. All of this is going on right now. And so on the day when Elkanah would sacrifice, he would give a portion to Peninnah, his wife. I heard this pronounced many Peninnah, many Peninnah, different ways. Peninnah, since I pronounce it that way, is the right way. And so there's multiple types of offerings. When you go up, as laid out in Leviticus and Exodus, there's multiple types of offerings. The one that's called a peace offering involves a sacrifice to God, which includes the fatty parts of the offering, which includes, that is believed to be the sweetest part, the sweetest aroma to God. And then the priest would take part of the shoulder, part of the chest, and then the offerer, whoever's offering, would also get a portion. So they're going up to make a peace offering. And from this peace offering, they're going to have a barbecue, and Elkanah is going to give a portion to Peninnah, and notice that she's got all kinds of kids. And he's going to give Hannah a double portion because he loves her. And so he cares about her. It's obvious that she must have been the first wife because she was barren, and they considered it a curse if they didn't have kids. I believe that Peninnah was probably his second wife. And she calls it her rival. When her rival is there, she is provoking her. She's basically saying, Hannah, you're cursed by God. And so imagine that. How many of you have ever dealt with infertility? I know the older members know that we've been through infertility years ago, and we're really infertile now. But very infertile now. And so, but long ago, before we had kids, we were infertile. And it's devastating. People come up to you and they say, I'm pregnant, and you're happy for them, but you just have this pit in your stomach. And this is worse for her. She has someone that's in her house that's telling her that she's cursed. It's not just a pit in her stomach. She has somebody telling her that she's cursed. And it's going on year after year after year. She would provoke her grievously because the Lord had closed her womb. This was not affliction. This was not infertility. This was God's sovereign choice. God made a choice that her womb was going to be closed. And so as often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she is not required, but she's faithful, Peninnah would provoke her. Do you think that husband knew this was going on year after year? 1,000% he knew this was going on. Now God uses misfortune. Go to slide 10. And he does all the way through the Bible. And he does with us. We see David in this story who is hunted, he's exiled, he loves Saul, he's loyal to Saul, and he won't raise a hand against Saul, and God uses him. We see Paul, who prayed over and over and over for the thorn in the flesh to be removed, and God said, no, my grace is sufficient for you. We see Joseph, whose brothers sell him into slavery. He's sold, falsely accused, and God saved a nation through him. We see Job, who lost everything, but because of that, he came to truly know God. And we see the blind man and the disciples coming up to Jesus and saying, is it because he was cursed or his parents were cursed? And Jesus says, neither. Not all of these things are because of a curse. Some of these things are because God is working in our lives. And God is working in this situation. So Hannah, but she doesn't understand. Going back to, I've studied this many, many, many times. And I've never really, I focused on what an idiot Elkanah is, saying, am I not worth more to you than 10 sons? But I haven't focused on what an idiot he is allowing this to go on in his house. And so I've been really good with my boys. I know that they can hurt my wife more than, or their wives or their whatever. I know they can hurt her way more than an outside source. And I've told them, I will get you. I will come back from the grave and I will get you so good if you ever hurt her. But what I haven't done is I haven't taught my sons that they need to treat their wives that way. They need to realize that Ephesians talks about us protecting the wife as the weaker vessel. And we're to become one means that when you're attacked, you are being attacked. The husband is being attacked. I looked at, and do you realize that men psychologically are more prone, if an intruder is coming in the door, men are more prone than women to head straight towards that intruder and to defend their house. And if shooters, if you're in an open auditorium, men are more likely than their wives to shield their wives from bullets. Do you know when it comes to internal conflict in the family, men are more prone to ignore it, to ignore conflict and let it go on. And that can't be. By the way, I sent an email to my sons. I'm like, I will get you if you do this to your wife. And I laid every bit of this out. Your job is to protect your wife. The fact that this went on is awful. This is not loving your wife as Christ loved the church. And so that's our standard. She provoked her, and she wouldn't eat. And he said, why is your heart so sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? And the wisest woman chooses just to totally ignore him. There's no response to this question because it doesn't deserve one. As we go to the practical takeaways. Slide 11. Don't let others' actions control your spirit. You can't control others, but you can absolutely respond with your own response. Secondly, God uses hardship for his divine purposes. It's clear that God has a plan that he is working his sovereign will in here. And third, people can love you, especially men, and still not understand you. And men will never understand women. It's just not. It's never, ever. It's not doable. It's not possible, and it will never happen. All men? Okay, not all men. All right. Uh-oh. Okay. Catherine.
Yes. After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose, and now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. And as she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli took her to be a drunken woman. And Eli said to her, How long will you go on being drunk? Put your wine away from you. But Hannah answered, No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for all along I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation. Then Eli answered, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant you your petition that you have made to him. And she said, Let your servant find favor in your eyes. And then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad.
Eli's very wise.
No, he's not.
Yeah,
He
yes.
said she was drunk.
Well, a lot of women come to church drunk. It happens all the time. All right, show of hands. How many of y'all are drunk? No, I'm good. All right. So after they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Eli the priest is sitting beside the seat of the doorpost of the temple. Where was the first temple? Jerusalem. Who built the first temple? Solomon builds the first temple. So why is this language?
Tabernacle.
Exactly.
Explain a little better.
I'm getting to it, all right? All right, go to slide 13 and I'll explain it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Here is the tabernacle. Did y'all know, I've done this before, but I used to could actually memorize the locations they were. There's 40 to 42 locations. While they're wandering, they're moving this thing on the upper left. Look at those big beams and all of that. They get to Shiloh, and they build rock walls. And you can go to Shiloh today, other than that it's in the West Bank and not safe, and you can actually see the foundations of the rock that was around it, and the rock walls. And in the Mishnah, so just the lesson in Hebrew, in Jewish faith, so the Mishnah, the Jews believe that when the Torah was given, the law, that God also gave them the oral law. And they passed down this oral law for years and years and years and years. And they eventually recorded the oral law, and they call it the Mishnah. Now, along beside that, they had commentary from priests, from rabbis, and they call that the Gemara. And all of that together is like the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's like this thick. And so as Jews are following laws, they're going back to this kind of thing. They're not going to a simple Bible. They have the oral law, they have the written law, and they've extrapolated meanings and all of that. Anyway, in the Mishnah, went off on that tangent, I just want you to know what it is, but in the Mishnah it records that they had built stone walls at Shiloh, and they had continued to use the covering of the regular tabernacle. So when he is set, and it's there for 350 years. And so when he is sitting on that doorpost, he's sitting beside a real door of the tabernacle, not the temple. And so eventually David, I've already showed you the map. Let's go back to the scriptures. So that's the tabernacle, and she is deeply, notice these words, she's all the way through, she's afflicted, deeply distressed, she wept bitterly, and she ended up vowing a vow. She says, look on the affliction of your servant. She feels afflicted. Don't forget me. And she makes a vow. Now you'll recall Jesus said we're not supposed to make vows. So go to slide 14. I'm going to explain why Jesus said that in a second. But first of all, in biblical considerations, vows are voluntary. We're not required to make vows. It's better that you should not vow than make a vow if you're not going to keep it. Number two, vows are seriously binding. If you make a vow with God, it's a binding vow, and you shall not break your word, as it says in Numbers 32. Vows should never be made rash or emotional. You remember the great story of Jephthah, the judge, who's fighting the Ammonites. And he says, if you'll just give the Ammonites into my hand, then the first thing that comes out of my door when I return home, I'll sacrifice as a burnt offering to you. And his daughter comes out. That was a rash vow. And it was the sin that he kept it. Number four, God desires integrity, not bargaining. She's not bargaining. There's nothing here. She is just praying because she's hurting. It's better to live faithfully than to make vows. Jesus, I'm going to read Matthew 5:33 through 37. This is where Jesus says, let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Again, you have heard it said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you've sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's the throne of God, or by earth, for it's the footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king, and do not take an oath by your head. So the Pharisees didn't want to take an oath on God. They didn't want to take an oath on the word of God. They didn't want to take an oath on anything holy. So they started making up things to take oaths on that were just for no reason whatsoever. They would say, I take an oath on my head. It's like, so it doesn't mean anything. They would take an oath on Jerusalem. That doesn't mean anything. And Jesus is like, just don't do any of that. Just let your yes be yes and let your no be no. So that's what was going on when it comes to this vow. So she makes a vow. It's not a deal. She's not bribing God. She is making a vow. And she says, O Lord of hosts, if you'll look on me, if you'll just look at what I'm going through, and you'll remember and not forget your servant, but will give me a son, your servant a son, I'll give him to the Lord all the days of his life. And no razor shall touch his head. What kind of vow is that? Nazirite vow. So, several things. So, he is the son of Elkanah. Elkanah, as we've established, is a Levite. Levites were God's people. He was already dedicated to God. He was already required by the Old Testament to serve God from the age of 25 years old to 50 years old. He's already dedicated. But she says all the days of his life. I will commit to you, God, that he'll be a Nazirite all the days of his life. If you go back to Numbers, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read it, but in Numbers, it talks about how you make a Nazirite vow. Well, that is a voluntary vow by a man or a woman. A man or a woman makes that on their own for 30 or 60 or 90 days temporary. And she's like, for all the days of his life, he is going to be a Nazirite. All the days of his life. During those days, he'll be separated for God. He won't touch wine or anything from the fruit of the vine because that represents luxury. He won't touch a dead animal because that makes him unclean. He won't have his hair cut for the entire time of his life. As long as he's separated to God, he's going to be dedicated to God for all the days of his life. So, and she's speaking. And aside from it being funny that he thinks she's drunk, what does that say about the nation of Israel at this point? First of all, that a priest will even notice a lady, the high priest. The high priest is there, and there's an inner court and an outer court, a court of women, and so the fact that he sees this woman in a far-off distance mouthing words and assumes she's drunk says something about what the state of Israel was about. He's like, how long will you be drunk? She had a high regard for life. So she believed that God was moving in everything, that was sovereign in everything. She believed that children were precious. So I'm going to apologize for being political, but I'm not really sorry. So we have a candidate for Senate that has said, Jesus never talks about abortion. Y'all have any idea who I'm talking about? Jesus never taught. This candidate for Senate is a seminary-trained reverend and running on the Democratic ticket. He's made a number of statements, but I'm only going to address this one. Jesus never talks about abortion. The Bible is silent on abortion. And when that happens on a social issue as important as abortion, we as Christians have to take the scripture as a whole and try to make some kind of ethical determination. I don't believe that is a place for government. That's not me. That's what he said. That's a quote. I don't believe that is a place for government. Later he said that the religious right has taken two issues and they have turned them into the most important issues in recent years. The church has taken the issue of abortion and homosexuality and made those the primary issues. And well, let me just tell you, the church hasn't changed on this. The Bible, if you look at God's purpose for creation, Psalm 139, 13 through 16, for you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In Jeremiah, before I formed you, before I, Yahweh, formed you in the womb, I knew you. Luke, John the Baptist, the baby leaped in her womb. The baby understood that this was the Christ. The prohibition on taking innocent lives, Proverbs 6, 16 through 17, there's 6 things the Lord hates. Hands that shed innocent blood. There was a legal value of the unborn. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, meaning they die, if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life. And children as a gift from God. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb and a reward. We know those scriptures are there. We look to those scriptures to there. The church has always been there. Go to the next slide. There is a document that is called the Didache. And the Didache was written 70 to 100 AD. So this is contemporaneous with the book of Revelation. The Didache purports to relay the thoughts of the apostles. And the only reason that it's not in, there's several reasons it's not in Scripture and not canonized. The primary reason that it's not canonized is because it's written as a manual. This is how the church should operate. This is how the church should baptize. This is how the church should regard life. And so it says, you shall not murder a child by abortion. And you're like, in 70 to 100 AD, they actually had a concept of abortion. They would have herbal herbal poisons, and they actually had surgical attempts that oftentimes would leave the mother dead. And so this was going on. You shall not murder a child by abortion is written right at the same time as Revelation, and it is honored by all the church. Tertullian, Christian writer, apologist from Carthage, which is modern-day Tunisia. And so he's one of the most influential people in the Western Church. In 155 to 220, in our case, a murder being once for all forbidden, we may not destroy even the fetus in the womb. To hinder a birth is merely speedier man-killing. Basil. So he's a Christian bishop, he's a theologian, major church father, church leader of Caesarea, 329 to 379. The woman who deliberately destroys a fetus is answerable for murder. Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas is a giant. Thomas Aquinas was influential in developing just war. He's a medieval Christian theologian, philosopher, and a priest. He that strikes a woman with a child does something unlawful, and if thereby death ensues, it will be a homicide. Martin Luther. For such is the power of God that out of a tiny seed he makes a human being. The fetus is nourished in the womb, and God is therefore forming it into a person. Calvin. The fetus, though enclosed in the womb of its mother, is always a human being, and it's a most monstrous crime to rob it of life. The church has not changed. This is not an endorsement of either party and nor his opponent. And the only reason I bring this up, and I'll probably bring it up more in other lessons, because there's a number of things that he said. He purports, and he is, a seminary graduate of a liberal seminary, and this is false teaching. And so I'm not saying he's a false prophet, but this is false teaching. It is false teaching, and it's my obligation, and I think it's the church's obligation to bring that up. So, back to the scripture. She continues praying before the Lord. He sees her mouth moving. How long will you be drunk? And she says she's pouring out her soul, and she says, I'm speaking my anxiety and vexation. And he doesn't grant her wish. That's not what's happening here. Then Eli answered, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you've made for him. This is just a blessing. It's not an assurance at all. But at this point, she has gone to God. She has gone to the religious leaders. She's gone and she's poured out her soul. She's done everything she can before God. Everything that she could possibly do before God. And because of that, she's relieved. At that moment, and she said, let the servant find favor in your eyes. And the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. She had done it all. And she had released. She had fully released it to God. And it was at that moment that she found a peace that only God can give. So, slide 17. Take your deepest burdens directly to God. Notice that she pours out her soul in honest personal prayer. Pray honestly, even when you're misunderstood by your knucklehead husband. Your prayer life is defined by God's hearing, not by others' perceptions. Trust that God is in control, even before the answer comes. And after the prayer, notice that she's no longer sad. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed in her life other than prayer produced surrender and peace.
They rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel. For she said, I have asked for him from the Lord. The man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the yearly sacrifice and pay his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, as soon as a child is weaned, I will bring him, so that he may appear in the presence of the Lord and dwell there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, do what seems best for you. Wait until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord establish his word. So the woman remained and nursed her son until she weaned him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, along with the 3-year-old bull, and ephah of flour and a skin of wine, and she brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. And the child was young. Then they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. And she said, "O my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who was standing here in your presence, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord." And he worshiped the Lord there.
They rise up early in the morning, and offerings at the tabernacle were made at 9 a.m., 3 p.m., and in the evening. So they get up early, they worship, they offer sacrifices, they offer prayer, they offer their whatever they brought in terms of the sacrifice, and then they head back home. And Elkanah, we know that when it says he knew his wife, there's a relational and a spiritual union that should take place, that did take place, and it says the Lord remembered her. It's using an anthropomorphism, and God never forgot her, but it's just saying he recognized the prayer, and he blessed her. And Grace, Hannah, conceived and bore a son, and she called him Shemuel. Shemuel is the Hebrew name for Samuel, and it means God has heard. And Elkanah and all his house would continue to go up to pay their own. He had his own vow, and Hannah didn't go up because she said, "I'm going to wait until this child is weaned, because when he's weaned, I'm going to turn him over for all of his life to the priest." And in this, I've read commentaries. There are people that believe they were weaned as early as 2, as late as 5. One commentator says 12 years old, and I'm like, that sounds sinful, right? That's crazy. But this word doesn't mean nursing. It just means that the point that the child's no longer dependent on the mother. But it's clear from this, that it's clear because it talks about bringing a young child. She brought a young child. So I remember Carolyn, some of the worst days of our life was dropping off our 4 sons at kindergarten and me having to deal with her, crying, and I'm like, they're gonna be back. There's gonna be a time you want them gone, I promise. And this is a real woman. This happened. We believe this happened. Imagine giving up your child. Phineas and the sons of Eli were awful. He couldn't raise his own sons, and they know it because they're stealing food from the sacrifices. These people know it, and you're about to give your 3-year-old over to him. But she did it because the Lord was to establish, and not only that, when she ended up giving him over, she gave an abundant sacrifice. Go to slide 19, and I'll finish quick. This Hebrew is read from right to left. So it's actually read, and bulls 3, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. Notice in the upper right hand that u verifam, im, what did I tell you about I am? That's plural. And so when it says a 3-year-old bull, I think the ESV is wrong. This is saying, and other versions say this, that she brought 3 bulls. And the reason I believe she brought 3 bulls is because of the rest of the gift. And 3 bulls and an ephah 1 of flour, that is 22 to 33 pounds of flour, 3 bulls, and 2.5 to 4 gallons of wine, a skin of wine. The requirement of Numbers was to bring 1 bull, to bring 3/10 of an ephah, not 22 to 33 pounds, 7 pounds, and a hin of wine, a half gallon. She brought 2.5 to 4 gallons. This is an abundant gift of just grateful worship. So, and it says, and he worshiped there. This little child was worship. Oh, it also says he lent. She lent him. That actually means granted. So this wasn't a loan. That's not what it means. This was a grant to God. and he worshiped there. 3-year-old worshiping God. And, worship is service. Worship is all these things. You can imagine Eli saying, go get my ephod, and him, cheerfully going to get the breastplate, and him filling oil, and him doing all of those things. He was worshiping God from when he was 3 years old by serving God in the tabernacle. Slide 20. Trust God when prayers are unanswered. It may be slow, but it is purposeful and precise. And it's often preparation, not neglect. True worship is not just receiving, it's releasing. Hannah took her greatest blessing and held it before God. And it can be your time, it can be your children, it can be your talents, it can be your money. Don't let answered prayer lead to spiritual complacency. When you get a prayer answered, honor God and continue to honor him in all that you do. All right, sorry I'm late. The red light went off back there. So y'all are so kind to give me a timer. I appreciate that. Someday I'll notice that. Right. All right, Don.